Yeah, sorry about that, guys. We should be should sound normal now. We have to go through and set this up every single time, like every single setting, because there's something weird with our computer and we can't get it fixed. So yeah, you guys, I have just been watching the events on the world stage. Being on entheogens and seemingly strong effect it has on animals' nature around you. Oh man, yeah. Well, I mean, I think, animals are sort of more on the wavelength that we call intuition. So, we talk about how cats and dogs sense things very easily. And probably one of the funniest experiences that I've ever had with psychedelics. At one point, don't ask me how this happened, it wasn't my doing, but my then wife had 23 cats. And and we lived in this barn in Colorado. And eventually we're just leaving the door open at night, and the numbers went down because there were a lot of coyotes around. We didn't do that deliberately, but that was just what happened. And one night we ate mushrooms when we had like the peak number of cats in the house, and they just went completely insane with their claws out, racing around the house, like tearing into our heads. I mean, it was insane. Like they would leap with their claws out and like run across the wall, and if your face was in their path, it was completely insane. But probably the best story that I have in this regard is probably not surprisingly regarding an ayahuasca experience that I had in the jungle. It was one of the very early ones, and it was one of my first times in the jungle. And so I was laying on the deck in this, it's the porch, I guess, because the house is on stilts. Laying on the patio, whatever it is, and the first thing that happened that was really weird is that I stood up and I vomited instead of vomit this like round white, like it was almost like a fur ball, but it wasn't made of fur. It was just really strange. And so Pachamama, the narrator in the ayahuasca experience, was telling me, you need to go out into the jungle. And I was like, okay, it's late as hell at night. I'm on ayahuasca. I'm not going to go walking into the Amazon rainforest in the middle of the night because some voice in my head is telling me to do that. And so suddenly I had to go to the bathroom really badly. So I started walking down to like the yard, like go out into the, there's like a grassy area before you go into the jungle, thinking I'd get off the hook that way. And I walked down, and as soon as I got to this tree, suddenly I had to vomit. So I vomit. And we had been fasting for 2 days. So, the idea is that you are somehow able, by some sort of parapsychological or, some kind of alchemical transmutation, to turn these traumas and negative experiences in your life into vomit and expel them permanently. And, to our Western modern minds, that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but if you've experienced it a few times, it gets harder and harder to dismiss. And so after this first bout of vomiting, and I stopped, and the first thought I had was, how is this even possible? I haven't eaten in 2 days, and another massive purge comes, and I'm seeing these streaks of like black energy, I guess, coming out, and as they pass through me, I can sort of experience and hear in my mind, it's difficult to describe, but these experiences that cause these traumas sort of on fast forward as these black streams of energy are passing. And so, if it was like my mother screaming at me when I was 6, you don't deserve ice cream, you know what I mean? Like that, I would hear it and like remember, but on fast forward. And so all this, actually, I missed something absolutely integral though. After the first round of purging, I was like, where did you get all of that? And she said, the same place I got all of this. And that's when the second bout ensued. right? So, and the really interesting thing about all of that is that, you know, if you have a basic understanding of psychology, it's not very hard to put together traumas and the associated behaviors, the associated aberrant behaviors that are born of those traumas, right? So, you know, having relived those traumas sort of in fast forward, I noticed behavioral changes that were directly connected to having expelled those traumas. So, you know, it sounds too good to be true, and it sounds, you know, just over the top crazy, but the fact of the matter is you barf up these traumas and they are eaten by the jungle in a matter of 30 minutes. You know what I mean? Absorbed in bugs. And so I was like, I'm not going into the jungle though. A snake's gonna bite me in the face, or, you know what I mean? It's just, I'm not doing it. It's dark out and it's the jungle, and I'd never been to the jungle before. It was my first trip into the Amazon. So, but I had gone down the steps to go to the bathroom, right? And I was like full of, you know, when I felt like I was going to explode when I left the porch, and I couldn't go. And I realized that whatever this intelligence in ayahuasca was had cinched me closed so that I had to cooperate. And this is something I've experienced a number of times in this plant's effort to heal us. It will manipulate our biology, our, you know, biological environment, however it needs to get the job done. And so I couldn't go. And so I realized that I had to go out into the jungle. And I was like, well, I know it. Something's going to kill me. And she said to me, when was the last time you were bitten by an insect? And I realized instantly that the moment I started hearing this voice, the mosquitoes had stopped biting me. Like, there were no more bugs apparently in the Amazon rainforest. And so she had me there because I was like, wow, that is crazy. And she said, they're all my creatures. I didn't drag you out here to the jungle to kill you. You know, I will help people that can help me. That's the whole point of all of this. And so I went out into this clearing in the jungle, and I was immediately allowed to go to the bathroom. So, but before that, I walked over to this log because I was looking for a place to sit down. And I looked at the log, and there's like 150 species of things on this little tiny stick with, you know, it's got mosses and lichens and beetles and all of this stuff, just, you know, all these different plant species. And I just imagine the bulldozers like smashing through, you know, realizing that every, like, you know, inch and a half thick stick has more biodiversity than the entire state of, is this blurry? Oklahoma. And, you know, that was quite a shock. And so, the point of it all though was that, you know, she told me to, after I was empty of the toxins, she told me to stand very still and close my eyes. And, you know, I had just gone like barely into the jungle, just like through some trees and right into it was just important that I was in there. And so she told me to breathe very deeply and to calm my energy. And, you know, if I felt any ego or fear or any of these sort of dissonant, what was the word? Interference pattern type energy, to let go of it. And as I cleared out my being, and became more and more calm and free of all of this dissonant energy, all of the animals in the jungle that were nearby started making sounds and coming closer and closer and closer and closer. And I started to realize that when I had certain emotional responses or certain like vibrations would pass through my being, specific sounds would come from the jungle, specific animals would react. And the lesson was just about how it truly is, consciousness is a universal field, and we have this like illusory perspective of a single vantage point, but that ayahuasca has the capacity to suspend that, and when that happens, you can really, it was an experience of a direct experience of the interconnectedness of all living things. And so I guess that's my very long-winded answer to your question about, I'm still getting used to this. My camera's now over there after it was coming from the computer for the last couple of weeks, so I apologize if I've been looking in the wrong direction all this time, but yeah, I hope you're still there too. I'm assuming, is it really laggy? Is that why we're losing a lot of people? Also, by the way, you guys, I think I'm going to have to, this is not my place, but in order to have lag-free live streams, I'm probably going to have to upgrade the internet out of pocket. So please do support us via the options in the chat. What is this? Sodium bicarbonate, baking soda. Yeah, right on. I'll give that a shot for sure. Loved your video in 11:11 and 23. Yeah, I don't know which one you mean. Brainwashed ape. Is it really laggy out there, you guys? Let me know, because like I said, I'm gonna pay them to upgrade the internet, and I don't want to do it if I don't have to. But what I was saying about the 11:11 video is that if it's the one called the Phoenix process, when you click on 11:11, you'll hear me say right on the money 11:11. And what I'm saying is that when you just think about these things, it sort of compels them to happen. And I mean, you can accuse me of editing it. People have done that, including you, Flezic, if you're still here. And then when you get to the 23-minute marker, I start talking about a type of meditation where you freeze an image and hold it in your mind, and my face freezes. So I caught two of these crazy synchronicities in one video, which was... Oh, the stream is fine. Okay. Well, yeah, I know, man. That is one of the craziest things I've ever seen on. It's one of the craziest things on the internet for sure, and it's unfortunate that video's gotten so few views, because I'd feel like that's like, one of the best documentations of this sort of phenomena, like where it's actually been captured. And then I did an 11:11 stream a week or two ago, and somebody noticed that it happened again live, so right at 11:11. And of course, again, you could accuse me of like looking at the and watching for it and doing it, but I promise you, I'm not. I'm just not that silly. Okay, so Marzi is asking about neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. I feel there's another factor that is missing for something truly innovative for the mind neuron and body's neurons, maybe neuron preservation and healing. That's not totally clear to me, like what exactly the question is, or like what you're talking about. Are you talking about a neurochemical link? Are you talking about experiential stuff? Yeah, I really appreciate that, Brainwashed Ape. I really try for that, and it has gotten me in a lot of trouble. I've definitely been censored. I put up a psilocybin mushroom video a few weeks ago that was... I didn't say anything about eating them. I didn't eat them myself. I was just picking them, and I just identified them and put it on. I got a strike. I was banned from YouTube for 2 weeks, which for me right now is actually a big problem, because that's just a big problem. And you guys can look around on YouTube. There are tons of videos of people eating mushrooms on YouTube, of all sorts of stuff. So, there's something that I have been talking about that has got me shadow banned. They actually notified me of that. I know a lot of you have heard this a million times, but But it's true. So I do need extra support sharing the videos and stuff because the algorithm deprioritized me. And then last week I posted a short about Epstein, and it was Bill Gates talking about how he only hung around Epstein because he wanted to get a Nobel Peace Prize. And I didn't say anything. There's nothing you could call misinformation or anything in there. And I got a 30-day ban from posting in groups and calls for some reason on Facebook, and they took the video down. And the only thing that I said is that Bill Gates made this ridiculous excuse, and he absolutely said this, right? And they actually gave me 30-day ban on Facebook and took the video down. So, I mean, you know what I mean? It's not easy to get this kind of information out there. And so, you know, I don't want to talk about this too much, but every time I really put myself out there trying to speak the truth, it puts my livelihood in danger. So, by the way, you guys, if you become a patron, we found a way around this. We're having a Discord. The Discord's already there. It's already set up. I posted you can join for free. But then we're going to have patron-only VIP rooms where we do the secret streams and stuff, and I'll finally be able to speak freely. We're taking the muzzle off in there because the algorithm can't do anything to me. No, I think you got the wrong idea about Freemasons. I'm not a member in good standing, but I am definitely an ex-Mason, and I've been associated with like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and you know, everything that you've been told about the Illuminati is not true. They're a real organization, or at least they were, and they were absolutely doing exactly what I'm trying to do. So everything, you know, I was saying this in the last stream, all of the alternative narrative stuff that you hear, you have to be even more suspicious of it than the mainstream stuff, because that's where all the propaganda is, right? And the Orwellian trick is to convince you that the enemy is your friend and your friend is the enemy. So, you know, the Illuminati was a group that was dedicated to getting rid of religion, getting rid of borders so that there was no more war, and sabotaging the entrenched elite banking system. And they were partly successful. Otherwise, we would all have been slaves a long time ago. So, the Discord link is in my subscription. The 30-second is the last level before you get into the before the blinders really come off. But yeah, I mean, I don't you know, of course I'm not targeted by any lodges. In fact, Mystic Mason is going to come on. I'm worried he's been ghosting me. I don't know. He was really excited about coming on, and he's not answering. Maybe he's just really busy, but we are going to try to have that conversation. He's a 32nd degree, and he has face tattoos and whatnot. It's like the new breed of Freemason, and he's supposed to come on for a chat. Yeah, no, of course, Marzi, he's talking about the psychedelic benefits and neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. Those things facilitate a hardware upgrade. That's it. You can't run more advanced programs on old hardware. So you have to you have to get new hardware in order to run more sophisticated programs. But if you don't guide your mind, if you don't develop the capacity to control your state when you take psychedelics, if you don't have the skill set to navigate, it can easily do more harm than good, because it's like you have all of these new neural pathways forming, you have all these new connections happening, you have all this communication going on across the brain. But if that's just random and it's not guided, then it's just creating a bunch of gobbledygook, and that's how people come deluded. That's what an acid casualty is. When people get so overwhelmed that they're just like rambling and babbling and losing it, that's what's happening. There's just so much more information and so many more connections being made that they just cannot filter it and focus it anymore. So in order to have productive psychedelic experiences, you absolutely have to know how to maintain your focus and your concentration. Of course, there are times when it is best to let go of those things and to just sort of allow yourself to disassociate and, to basically like order out of chaos. You know what I mean? It has to come apart and allow space for it to reconfigure. The space allows the movement, is one way to think about it. By the way, you guys, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, and all the other ways that you can support. The Patreon thing, and now that we have the Discord, is going to be a lot more fun, because I won't have a muzzle on anymore. So, yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to that conversation. I hope he didn't like dig something up and decide it's not a good idea or something. I don't know what's happened to him. But yeah, you have to be able to guide the mind. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be able to focus, and the most complete set of talents and virtues is totally useless in the absence of willpower and discipline. And so the same goes for, a tool. You can upgrade your tools, and if you don't know what you're doing with them, you're just, an idiot with a better tool, and that doesn't do anything. I mean, if you don't know how to play the guitar, and you get a $3,000 guitar and a $5,000 amp, and a bunch of $200 cables and the best overdrive in the world, just going to sound worse, really, because you're going to have more noise and you're going to be louder, and that's all you're going to accomplish. You know what I mean? So that's why the syncretic approach is always the best. When it's syncretic music, when they draw on blues and hip hop and jazz and psychedelic rock and heavy metal, and blend that all together, you get the best shit that's ever happened. And the same is true with spiritual practices, with sciences. All disciplines benefit from this sort of cross-pollination. If you don't have that with genetics, then you have inbreeding, and you have all kinds of problems. All of the systems in nature are basically a fractal of this one thing doing one thing. And so, you can understand the sort of MO of any system if you understand any part of that fractal. So when you come to these laws, like, the necessity to move the water in order to keep it from stagnating, that is going to apply to all pools of social pools, business pools. Like, that's when they say, competition is good for business. Actually, it's the same idea as introducing diverse genetics into a population of dogs or cats. So yeah, it's the same thing. By the way, you guys, keep the questions coming. I'm just awake and here for your edification and amusement. Interbreeding can help plants but not animals. Well, it's a slightly different thing, and it's not that it can't help them. It does help them to stabilize a breed, and if by help you mean to stabilize like a breed of dogs, there's still some sort of interbreeding going on, but just not direct inbreeding. I mean, you don't need a padded suit. You just need assistance from someone that knows what they're doing. Is this light getting like out of control bright? I think I need to adjust my camera so it stops auto-adjusting. I apologize if it's doing all kinds of wacky stuff. Or maybe I should turn off the light behind me or something. It just looks like it's glaring. There we go. What was I saying? Okay, padded cell or whatever, the suit. It sounds like you have a lot of concerns about doing harm to yourself. This has come up several times in the chat. And so, I definitely, if you have that much concern, you definitely should have like a group of trusted people. Like, if you're a large male, you need to make sure that there are people that can actually restrain you if you're planning on taking a high dose. If you have this much concern about taking a high dose and freaking out, then there's a good chance you're going to freak out. But it is true that at any time, like, I ate LSD for off and on, high dose, low dose, moderate dose for 20, 20 almost 20 years before I ever became overwhelmed. Not to the point where it was like really bad, but I was like stuck in a loop, and it just got weird, and it wasn't even that many micrograms, and it was just a couple of years ago. And I'm a person that can drink a lot of ayahuasca and still play the guitar and walk around and help people, and you know what I mean? So it does sometimes just kind of happen out of nowhere, and for no apparent reason. But the reality is that I did have a lot of stuff going on at that time, and I think I had underestimated the influence that it was exerting. And, so if I had been a little bit more aware of myself and had not, overestimated my capacity to just be, made of steel, and you know what I mean? Yeah, it was a bad loop too. It was a bad loop. I still, here, the interesting thing about that is that when I get stuck in this loop, it happened once before with San Pedro, and it's always the same topics. Like, the 2 times in my life that I've been stuck in a loop, I was going through the same sequence of words and the same ideas. So that's another thing. I know that it happens because there's some unprocessed material somewhere in my being that needs to work itself out. And it felt so urgent and so, imminent that I had to, balance this equation or else. And, but what I was really trying to say about that is that there's no such thing as a bad trip. It's, how do people say this? It's not a bad trip. It's just a difficult one. I can't do that. Once I work through the loop and figure out what it means, but it was a lot of like really random stuff, like stuff that had happened with humanity and time, and Egypt would come up a lot, and just all sorts of, and then all like the major like atrocities, Hitler and Mao and Stalin and all this kind of stuff, like fragments of all that. Yeah, I don't want to get too deeply into that. But what I was saying is that if you have a bad trip, you have to, there's something that has to be dealt with. And usually that experience only comes from clinging to your shadow. People come to identify with parts of themselves that don't serve them. And then when the light is shown upon that thing that no longer serves them, they cling to it like a man lost at sea clinging to a life raft, because they feel like if they resolve this trauma or let go of this aberrative behavior or whatever it is, that they're going to lose some essential part of themselves. And that's more 90% of the really, really difficult experiences that I see as an ayahuasca facilitator or wachuma or LSD or whatever. It's almost always because someone is trying to cling to some aspect of themselves they need to let go of, desperately clinging to it. So, one of the other things you can do, people talk so much about integration, but there's not as much talk about preparation. And really formulating the proper set and entering into the proper setting is at least as important as the integration. In fact, the integration work will be a lot less intensive if the proper preparation is done before going into it. And that means working on your ability to focus, working on your ability to control your reactions, for your breathing skills. You have to hone your breathing skills, because that is one of the most important skills that you're going to need if you have to calm yourself down, if you need to change your state, and then developing a mindfulness practice every day where you're constantly watching your thoughts and analyzing them and your behaviors, and also striving for objectivity, so that you really truly can be detached from blame and guilt and shame, and really only seek understanding and not, revenge and retribution against yourself, much less anyone else, but in this case, particularly against yourself. Yeah, absolutely. Any emotion, any state, any grief and trauma and stuff can absolutely become a toxic crutch, and it's really easy for people to do that because if you've been victimized in particular by someone or something, no one's going to really feel comfortable in calling you out if you are not able to frame this in the proper reference, put it in a proper frame of reference. You know what I mean? So a lot of like grief and trauma, it's very difficult for people to confront their friends and family members. So, you know what I mean? You may not hear anything from anyone because it's not appropriate, or, they're not sure how to approach it. And also, people will use grief and other types of traumas as justifications for all sorts of other behaviors, addiction and anger problems and all sorts of things. And, they just blame it on this one trauma. And that's so common, it's nearly ubiquitous. I mean, probably almost everyone does it to some degree, but some people do it more than others. And I think it's really, really common even for people to choose some incident from their life and sort of hang all of their shit on it. And it's, at the end of the day, it's not got anything to do with it in a lot of cases. So sure, that's absolutely something that happens a lot. Do I practice any particular form of meditation? Well, there are all sorts of forms of meditation. I consider improvising on my guitar to be a form of improvisation. In fact, playing music takes so much brain power because you're doing a bunch of different things at once. The guitar in particular, I think, because you're coordinating two hands to do entirely different movements. You have to think about rhythm. If you're playing chords, you're thinking about harmony, and then you're also thinking about melody. So you have all of these different, it's multitasking, which they say can make you dumber. But in the case of guitar playing, I don't think that's the case. And so, when you get into flow state, this is a transcendental state of mind. There's no question about that. I actually have many times felt like I was absolutely possessed by the music, I guess. I've had experiences where one in particular, I even remember I was playing Casey Jones by the Grateful Dead, and I went to play like the signature riff in the song, and I looked down at my hand, and it took off in the opposite direction that I was telling it to go. And I was like, I just watched it play something, and it was way better than what I was consciously trying to play. But that was kind of the most extreme where, like I had something I was commanding my hand to do, and it just made a decision on its own that had no input from me at all whatsoever. And, so that sort of stuff really epitomizes, I think, experience of the transcendental other. You have, in those moments, become an avatar for something higher, or at least something other. Because I don't really like that designation of higher and lower. I don't actually believe in a spiritual hierarchy, and I think the idea of spiritual hierarchy is responsible for a lot of, not serial killers, but like mass killers, and, when schizophrenics become violent and stuff, or, people hear a voice in their head, and we have this idea that was an odd sort of pounding sound. We have this idea of, a higher God, and so you hear a voice in your head and you think there's a hierarchy, so people seem to feel compelled to do what these voices tell them to do. if we eliminate that, I think we could see a significant decline in a lot of these horrific crimes. It's the way that I think about it is that there is a consciousness that exploded into fragments, and everyone is a fragment of it. But it's like if my body blew up, you're not really going to think like, oh, this finger is like higher than this finger, so it has like somehow, you know what I mean? It's just all parts of one thing that's the same thing. Like if a star exploded, that's an even better analogy. It's the same thing. There's no part of it it's just all the star. So, it's all God. There's nothing that's not God. This separating of the divine from the creation that a lot of these religions have imposed upon their believers and really the rest of us by proxy, sort of bleeds over into even non-believers' life. A lot of this psychological stuff, that's absolutely one of the greatest blasphemies. I remember being a kid and Christians talking about how, I would say, like, I think that, we're all just like pieces of God, and they would be like, oh my God, how can you say that? You're not God. That rock isn't God. And then I was like, no, the rock is God. I mean, it's all God. The dog's God. And they would just be horrified and, actually saying things like, let me get away from you before you get struck by lightning, which would, of course, provoke me to just scream blasphemies at the top of my lungs. And nothing ever happened, of course. In fact, I think if there is a God, it absolutely appreciated those moments. You know what I mean? It was cheering me on. I can't help but believe. I feel like I lost. What does listening to the Grateful Dead on LSD do? That is a good goddamn question right there. Yeah, that, do I practice? Oh, yeah, I was talking about meditation. How I ended up on that rant about divinity is, that inculcating of this divine presence or universal mind, those trance states where these things happen and that question about the Grateful Dead, that's what the Grateful Dead were doing, is what I just described. They were able to deactivate the filters in their consciousness so that they were connected with the audience and each other to a degree that I think most people don't even understand is possible. They don't believe that it's possible. I actually got to talk to Phil Lesh about this for about 20 minutes at his club in Terrapin Station in San Rafael before it closed down a couple of years ago. I was really sad to hear that because it was extraordinary in the early days that Phil Lesh was so accessible. He would just be in there, and you could just go up to him and talk to him. Well, I think before the stars die, they are us. We'll get to that one too. But what I was saying about the Dead is that, and what Garcia actually told Rolling Stone magazine in 1987 is that they asked him, like, how is it you guys have played, 1,800 songs? Garcia was in like 4 bands that all played the songs differently every time. They're like, how do you do that? How can you play so many different songs? They never repeated a set list except for once in 30 years. So they never played the same songs in the same order once, except for once in 81 and 91. And the interviewer asked him, how the hell is that possible? And he said, well, I've just taken enough LSD that the filters in my being have come down. I'm paraphrasing, but he said there's like a filing cabinet that contains all the information in the universe, and he said I can just kind of scroll through it and get what I need when I need it. And so they also claimed that they could teleport into each other's body and play each other's instruments, and they could teleport out into audience members. And so, people, deadheads, would be like, man, I swear to God, Jerry was like watching the show with me through my eyes. And according to the Grateful Dead, it was actually possible that guy wasn't just high, that it might have actually been Garcia doing that, according to the band. So they referred to this presence that would enter into the band during these moments of transcendental observation or transcendental improvisation as it, and they said they didn't know what it is. They didn't know whether it was a spirit or just the collective consciousness of the band in the audience, or they said we don't know what it is and we can't make it happen. No amount of trying in the world can make it happen. And so if you are listening to a Grateful Dead show on LSD and one of those moments happens, you can experience exactly what happened when they were all there to an extent. It's a little bit muffled, but and what those moments do is that your consciousness is going to entrain with other electromagnetic pulses. And so when this state was achieved and you are exposed to it, it brings your consciousness into a similar place. It brings it into communion with the universal mind, direct experience of this greater consciousness. So that's what happens when you listen to the Dead on LSD. And also I think that a lot of what they were doing when those moments hit is not really perceptible to our normal consciousness. When you've taken LSD, you're using parts of the brain that are not normally used under any circumstances. Like they have given brain scans to advanced monks and all sorts of people, and the only time they've ever seen activity, electrical activity in these certain parts of the brain were when they did brain scans of people that were on LSD or psilocybin. And so no one knows what that means yet. I think that it means that, what's happening is that what we call parapsychological phenomena, those are the parts of the brain where that stuff is happening, or that facilitate that stuff. But at any rate, and also you have, communication going on between regions of the brain that doesn't normally. You have this interconnectivity, you have all this new neurogenesis going on, the electrical activity is exploding, so you're able to perceive more of the universe. And what the Grateful Dead was doing is over the heads of most dumb monkeys. It's just they can't even perceive it. I didn't at first, you know what I mean? I had to take acid and then I listened to it and I was like, holy shit, you gotta be kidding me. You know what I mean? And that's usually necessary for most people. You're not going to get the Grateful Dead until you have listened to them on acid. And that was one of the big criticisms. People said, oh yeah, you're just high, deadheads are all idiots. Well, I think time has kind of shown that that's not what's going on there. Clearly there's way too many of us that can describe exactly what I'm saying. You know what I mean? It's a real thing. And what it really is a signpost of the next evolutionary phase, the next evolutionary paradigm. It was sort of one of the, I don't want to say early because it's been going on forever, but it was it was a major catalyst, but it was also a major indicator, a signpost of the development that was coming and that is happening. And it's also the reason why right now the elites are trying so hard to divide and conquer, pitting everyone against each other, scrambling everyone's brain on the right and the left. In order to follow any of these narratives, you have to, if you're going to be on the right and get along with everyone, you're sort of forced to believe a mixture of things that make sense and also are completely stupid and insane. And they're doing the same thing to the left. And then they're also sort of, I believe, they're, putting a lot of agents out there to make, fringe left people and fringed right-wing people. The guy they just put in charge of nukes or something. He's not a guy. He's what are they called? Gender fluid. And he's way over the top. He's not just normal. It's so flamboyant and ridiculous. Personally, I think he's just a Fed. And that's what they're doing. They're just coming up with the most insane, ridiculous, over-the-top shit they possibly can to pit each other against each other. And it's not even really the right or the left. They're just agent provocateurs. Yeah. I mean, Yeah, it's the dead was a crazy ass thing, man. It really really is just, it's still to this day, after 30 years of listening to tons of it, I still hear new music from them. Not new, but music I haven't heard before that surprises me. I mean, it's crazy. It's absolutely just the craziest thing. But here's the deal: vibration and consciousness are basically on an infinite spectrum. So, they had basically just turned on their whole brains, brought down their filters so they had access to like most of the universal mind all the time, and they were intelligent enough and they had enough discipline to stay focused while that much information was flowing. Um, and I'll actually tell you what I asked Phil, because it was his responses were indicative of the kind of genius these guys are channeling. Um, and so I said, Phil, look me in the eyes. I have to hear it from the horse's mouth. The telepathy thing is real. It's not like a marketing gimmick or something. And he did look me dead in the eyes, and he said, it's absolutely real, but you have to be listening in a way that has a depth that goes well beyond your ears. And then as I was walking away, he said, I'll tell you something that Charles Mingus told me, which was, he said, you have to get out in front of it. And it took me probably a year to figure out what the hell he was talking about. And what he meant was, you have to you have to be looking at the music from a trans-temporal point of view. So you know what has come in the past, you can see what's happening now, and you can conceptualize the future all at once. So that just like a painting where you have, it's in front of you and you can see the whole big picture. So it's just absolutely remarkable. And he is an extremely warm and generous person. A lot of people have a lot of weird theories about the Grateful Dead. I'm not sure about Bob Weir and Mickey Hart, but Phil, I definitely know he's a genuinely good guy. No, I don't know who Blady is. Word of the day: trans-temporal. Not trans-temporal, yeah, but trans-temporal is also dope. Trans-temporal is how you get there. I was talking about that experience I had where my hand overruled my orders and played something had nothing to do with anything that I was planning to do. Usually before that kind of experience, I would literally black out, and it didn't even require drugs. But I would know that I had gotten into this state because I would be drenched in sweat, and usually like my microphone stand would be knocked over, or there would be some kind of, evidence of having not been fully conscious. And I remember one of the most extreme cases of it, I was still soloing, and I was really wet from sweat, and I was thinking, like, why am I so wet in my bed? What are all these people doing in my room? What the hell is going on? And the whole time I'm like trying to figure out what's happening, I'm still playing better than I could. And that's another thing, when you're in that trance state and then you realize it, it's just like when you realize you're dreaming in a dream and you wake up. I would almost always make a mistake instantly. As soon as I realized, oh, I'm there, it would just wreck. By the way, you guys, do me a favor and hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. I'm serious about the sharing because we are demonetized, so that algorithm does not help me, and so I need you to do it. And you can also support us via PayPal and all this stuff here. You can you can support us with all this stuff. Man, what is it? Oh, it's only 12:17. It's not too bad. So the stream's not too laggy, I hear. That's good. There you go. Do you have a Discord link? Yeah, it's in the... Oh, that was an old... Old message. Okay, you guys, you got any more topics you want to throw out there? Any questions? Madness. What is it? Christmas Eve tomorrow? Nice. Okay, well that's good to hear. He may have already upped the internet, the data. But everywhere we go in the jungle, it's been, we just got back from, well, back here. We were here before, and now we're here again. But we were staying with a Quechua family on an island in the Napo River. And I didn't realize until the last day we were there, how authentic, I guess, the situation was. But last night we were having dinner, and the matriarch said, well, we just got electricity in 2009, and I was like, what? So apparently they didn't have electricity, and the patriarch was explaining, how they would take like plastic bottles and put kerosene in a piece of a t-shirt, and that was like crazy, when he was like in his 20s, and they discovered that they could make these little candle things, and they were just such like warm people. He taught me how to throw a cast net, so much more easily than I had been doing it. Makes life so much easier to throw it this way. And they were taking my partner Enrica around and showing her all the plants everywhere and the Quechua names, and I told them I wanted to learn Quechua, so they were trying to teach me every chance they got, and it was just really, really nice. Unbelievable, how different people are that have not been exposed to our culture, like modernity. I didn't mention that earlier, and I wanted to put it out there. You guys also are on a 6-minute lag or something like that, so if you have any more questions, wait, what was toxic? I definitely wasn't talking about them. I gotta find my kratom. I'll be right back. That's odd. Okay, so yeah, how is it toxic? Like, what do you mean? What was toxic? Not the Quechua family wasn't toxic. I definitely didn't say anything about that. Another crazy thing that was happening there, the second to last night we were there, the second to last night we were there, vampire bats started hovering like right around my head, our heads, my partner and I. They were hovering like right around our heads, and so the next day at dinner, the patriarch, yeah, I am doing a lot better than I was a year or two ago. I was in pretty bad shape. Actually, never really figured out why. I did figure out that I have non-alcoholic fatty liver, which is weird. But yeah, I was on death's door this time about a year or two ago. Oh, no, man. That's not that's not this family. That was like the Puka Orco neighborhood, and yeah, man, that was sad. But that's what happens when the indigenous are like right on the edge of like modernity, alcoholism, and I don't know what it is, but even though people don't have any more money out here, further out in the jungle, they have less money. If anything, things are cleaner. Like, people are not drunk. The people on the island, for example, they got kind of a little bit drunk one night in the 8 days we were there. You know what I mean? So it's just that proximity to civilization is just not good for people. Um, what's the best process to transcribe psychedelic vertical thinking concepts that are incomprehensible, soldier? Um, we'll get to that. That's a good one, though. Do you see a difference between Nuit from Thelema and Ein from Kabbalah? Yes. Nuit is definitely not nothing in the way that Ein or Ein Sof or Ein Sof Hour are. It's not that. Space in our realm is. Oh, but the vampire bat story. Let me finish that real quick. So, the vampire bat was like flying right around our bed, driving me insane. Like, I didn't want to fall asleep because if it gets you, you have to get rabies shots. Bats actually aren't a vector for rabies as much as people think, but just in case, because if you have onset, you're gonna die. Period. End of story. No chance of survival. None. Like, if you don't get the injections before rabies sets in, you're dead. Period. And so the vampire bats are, like right around our heads all night. And so the next night at dinner, the patriarch says, when I was a kid, we would wake up and there would be blood all over our heads, and because the vampire bats would just nick them. And he said, but it doesn't happen anymore. And I looked over and I realized they had a metal roof on their house now where they're sleeping, but we still have the traditional thatch. And so I was like, holy crap. It was just so crazy that he thought they were gone the way he was like gone from the property. And it was just nuts that, they were flying around my head. And then last night, we put a mosquito net around, and they were actually slapping into the mosquito net, trying to figure out how to get in there and nick us and drink some blood. Okay, so let's go back. Would you consider yourself a Gnostic? Like, do you think the creator is evil? No, I do consider myself a sort of Gnostic, but it's more like a neo-Gnostic. It's just basically the idea that no divine revelation or knowledge of what I call the universal mind instead of God or source or creator or any of that stuff means anything unless you got it yourself. There's nothing in any book. Like, I'm 100% certain that you could burn and destroy all of the religious crap in the entire world, all the writings of every guru. It doesn't matter. Totally irrelevant. And you are better off, catalyzing organic internal experiences that lead to a sort of understanding of your place in the universe. And one of the interesting things to me is that, I can tell when people have had what I had called gnosis, and they all believe the same thing, which is basically that in the beginning there was this nothing, and then nothing became conscious, and that caused it to divide, and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? And something along those lines. And so we are just fragments of that one consciousness experiencing an experience because there's nothing else to do. And that's it. That's it. That's it. There's no more to it than that. And the laws of the universe are as they are because they couldn't be any other way. And so there's equal parts darkness and light. And so if you're wondering why there's evil in the world, that's why. It's either nothingness or somethingness with duality, right? So, no, I don't think there is a creator. I don't believe in spirits, really, even. I know that the universal mind can sort of interact with us, but let's say that I do kind of believe in spirits, but I don't believe in like autonomous spirits or necessarily that they even have their own self-awareness. When I interact with plant intelligences, that's sort of a different thing in my mind. And I have no way of knowing for certain whether that is just a part of our mind that is more connected and has access to information that we don't. You know what I mean? The filters are down. Now we have access to more of the consciousness, but it doesn't really mean that it's like a entity of its own. So the way that I think about it is that the universal mind, the greater consciousness of which we are a part, is equal parts dark and light. So it's like a regular human, only it's blown up to like a insane scale that is unfathomable to us. Um, so yeah, the whole demiurgos thing. I mean, I guess the creator could be compartmentalized, so there's like lower orders of it or whatever. But I think that whole thing of what is it called when you make an inanimate thing have human characteristics? Anthropomorphizing. I know the word, I just can't say it right now. But you know what I mean. I think that's a mistake. We need to actually drop all of the Bronze Age fairy tale trappings and realize that it's time to actually step into the light of truth where there are no ghosts. Um, and the difference between Nuit and Ayin from Kabbalah, yeah, I mean, Nuit is also symbolic of the way to think about that. Actually, I think if you know the middle pillar exercise and the symbolism of it, where you have the Jachin and Boats, and one is white and one is black and one is dark and one is light and one is masculine and one is feminine and so on and so forth. And so you can, organize all of the things in the universe according to their fundamental nature as belonging to one side or the other. And so, Nuit is the potential, the circumference the circle whose circumference is everywhere and center nowhere. Or is it center is everywhere and circumference is nowhere? I think either works, actually, really. Um, what's the best? Yeah, there you go. Anthropomorphized. What's the best process to transcribe psychedelic vertical thinking concepts that are incomprehensible sober? Well, tripping, basically, in the first place, is uh, what happens in my experience is that these filters come down, right? Like, you have to pretty much have a psychedelic experience and listen to a Pete Grateful Dead concert to really understand it. But then after that, when you listen to it, you have much clearer perception of it, right? And so that's a big part of it, really. It's just once you've had the experience, the parameters of your perception are less constricted, and so you are able to perceive things with this expanded consciousness. I mean, that's literally what it is. One of the things that has really gotten my goat over the years is that so many people feel this, they're compelled by some instinct to pursue higher consciousness, to expand their consciousness. But I think particularly in the 60s, no one really asked, like, what does that actually mean? What's going to happen when we do that? And I think a lot of people had a sort of notion that they might become nicer from observing like Buddhist monks. They meditate a lot and then they don't even want to kill worms. You know what I mean? But beyond that, they didn't really think too much about it. They could have learned from the Buddhists that once you expand your consciousness, you start to experience cities, which are things like telepathy, precognition, and the master would tell the student to ignore the cities because they become demons. And what that means is that when you start to have intuitions and precognitions and all that, you start to think, I'm psychic. And you are, but not all the time. And if you don't have the discipline and willpower to ascertain real intuition from wish demons and precognition from wishful thinking and all of that, then you just come unglued. You think that magic can do more for you than it can. You know what I mean? You end up chasing your tail and worse. So that's, and then of course all of the regular, the normal answers would be, meditation and educate yourself and all of this stuff. And I'm not really making fun of those things, but actually the best answer I can give is this macro flow state idea that I've been working on. Well, it's not that I've been working on it. It's more like I realized that I had been doing it, and I needed a label to put on it so that I could communicate it with people. And so what happened is I started to read about flow state, and I realized that these weren't triggers in my case where, they were in like micro activities that I was doing, like just playing guitar, and then I would improvise and take chances improvising and concentrated and creative. All of these flow state triggers, right? Guitar is a great one for it. But I realized that being obsessed with the mystery and metaphysics, that I had been absolutely concentrated on a single idea almost since I had come out of the womb. Like I've always just been on this one track mind. There are multifacets to this one track, but it's basically one track. And I don't really ever deviate from it. I've been more or less on the same trajectory with my intellectual being and my spiritual being since I was 5 years old or whatever. And I've always lived a very risky outlaw life, which is another flow state trigger. And so let's see, risk, focus, creativity, all sorts of different creative endeavors. And so as I went through this list of flow state triggers, I realized that I had lived my life in a sort of flow state where I have been super receptive to intuition and, more or less in a lifelong sort of trance. So that's really the best answer I can give you. Consciously manage your dopamine, right? Develop a serious skill to manage your dopamine, which doesn't mean to just raise levels with artificial stimulus and caffeine. Well, caffeine is actually, for some reason, not really on the cheat sheet. Caffeine works like some of the, they say you should earn your dopamine rather than just doing cocaine or whatever. Caffeine somehow is actually on the list of healthy or consistent, where it raises baseline, helps you raise baseline. But in general, you want to use diet not to eat dopamine, but to put the precursor L-Dopa into your bloodstream and therefore into your brain. And then, between diet and exercise, and then figure out how to incorporate flow state triggers into the macro structure of your life. And so it becomes, it's not, flow state isn't like this intermittent thing that you enter into when you're doing something like a sport or playing music. It's how you live. So I think that's probably the best I can do with that. All right, guys, you got anything else for me? I can tell by the way that I'm speaking that I'm starting to get a little dingy. But I probably have a good 20 minutes left in me if there's still people out there. Keep smashing the like button, by the way, you guys. And also, after the stream is over, it helps me a lot if you comment. If you think of a question later and you plop it in the comments, I will answer them. It's funny. I saw some political stuff that I hate doing that because, no matter whether you're right or not, and no matter how neutral I try to be, it's always going to make somebody on one side or the other hate me. You know what I mean? It's a really difficult thing. And one of the reasons it's frustrating for me is that it's a great tool to sort of illuminate the mass psychology and how the propaganda works. But I can't even start talking about it without triggering people and alienating people. So it's kind of a sad situation because it's really very useful to talk about politics in that context. But I saw something today. I haven't looked into it much, but it's worthy of noting, and we should all probably keep our eyes on it. When the Patriot Act was signed into law, it went at midnight, and no one really read it. They just all signed it, and they called an emergency session in the middle of the night, and only certain people, just enough of them, it was super sketchy. And apparently some like $1.7 trillion, or it might have been more. It's some crazy number, definitely in the trillions. And they have to sign it without anyone reading it for some reason. And so my gut reaction to that, my knee-jerk reaction, is that it's something like the Patriot Act, only worse, because it has this massive funding, at least on a much larger scale. So I think the stakes, that to me, that's an indication that the stakes have been raised, that the whatever major event is on the horizon, the climax of the immanentization of the eschaton, it seems to be right on the horizon. So it's definitely, I think, absolutely imperative for all of us to get in touch with our deepest fundamental selves, actualize ourselves, individuate ourselves, but actualize ourselves in the context of, really bringing forth our greatest strengths and our ability to transcend, political variations. And, we have to find strength within ourselves to be forgiving and neutral, and to overlook all of our disagreements and differences except for those that are insurmountable, right? Because wedge issues are fundamentally things that don't really matter in the long run. Like, a lot of the stuff that is dividing people is actually really inconsequential. And it's something we really need to look at. 1.7 trillion, 4,000 pages. Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. They're not allowed to read it? They're not allowed to read it? I mean, that's the thing, we should be able to read it. I really agree with Socrates, that he hated democracy, because he was like, do you really want your average Walmart shopper choosing world leaders? And of course, those aren't exactly the words he would have used 2,000 years ago or whatever, but close enough. And it's true. The only way for democracy to work is if you have an illuminated, intelligent, highly educated, but in the right way, populace. Otherwise, what are you doing allowing these people to choose leaders? And if you look at the people that are able to win over the electorate in the United States, I don't believe that anyone is elected. I don't think any of it's real. It's all a joke. It's all a farce. It's all a total farce. But if you look at the people that have fooled the people, they're not even good clowns. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. It's completely insane that anyone would throw their hat in the corner of any of these people. And it's a really good evidence that, we don't, democracy is not where it's at. It really isn't. A solution that is viable is elusive, to say the least. But my opinion, for what it's worth, is that the only viable alternative, the only realistic solution, is a type of illuminated anarchy that is facilitated by the expansion of consciousness and the reception of gnosis, right? An illuminated population is the only, and here's the thing, illuminated people, truly illuminated people, do not need to be governed, right? They're not going to steal from people. They're not going to go hurt people. They know, what are you but my reflection? Who am I to judge or strike you down? They know that from the point of view of the universal consciousness, the universal mind, you're going to experience everything from every possible point of view. Every single ant that's ever lived, there's like, I think they weigh more than all the humans or something. You know what I mean? Every dog, every person, all of these. So if you do anything to anyone else, you're going to live that lifetime at some point. So you got to go through it. Like, you know what I mean? And it becomes something different than karma. You're not even, sparing someone because of what it's going to do to them, or the consequences for you, you just understand that it's just one mind. You will come to find that we are all one mind. That Tool song, he's not wrong. You know what I mean? And so you have illuminated people that don't need to be governed, and so therefore they will not tolerate being governed. Right? So that is the only possible path to a reasonable planet with humans on it. That's it. Until everyone can recognize their sovereignty and take responsibility for it, you've just got a bunch of rabid, dumb monkeys on a mud ball floating around in space. There's just no hope. You cannot just choose a book of laws, whether it's religious or political, and profess to constrain your demons to, be subordinate, to accept the jurisprudence of this book. You're just going to conform to these laws because you just have to. That never has worked. It's never done anything for anyone. It doesn't work. Clearly, look around the planet. Look at all the religious people. They're full of shit. You know what I mean? And they're blowing buildings up, and they support wars, and you know what I mean? It's not good. It's not even good. In my opinion, the religions like Christianity actually serve to obstruct real spiritual experience. They actually preclude those experiences as a possibility for people. So no, power doesn't corrupt leaders exactly. Power corrupts leaders that are already vapid and, empty and traumatized. And you know what I mean? It's not, I guess, I can't prove this in unless it happens. But I am absolutely 100% certain that I would never deviate from my ethics because it is who I fundamentally am. People talk about getting in touch with their higher self, or holy guardian angel, or whatever. There's all these different terms for it. But for me, I could accrue maybe $3 or $4 million, maybe $5 million. And then everything after that, I would feel gross to keep it. You know what I mean? I think it's reasonable and fair to keep enough money to guarantee that you can live the rest of your life without having to be concerned about money again, because it's a complete waste of time. And you are not a success until you can decide what you are going to do with every single waking moment, right? And the first thing you have to do in order to have that sovereignty in the context of the current system, you have to be able to financially buy your way out of slavery, but beyond that, I know that I would just give it all away. I know with absolute certainty. You know what I mean? Like, there's no point. There's no purpose. And having power is not going to corrupt me. It's not going to change anything. You know what I mean? So I do think that once you get to a certain point in your development, people just sort of become sane. That's all it is. It's not some extraordinary accomplishment to achieve illumination. I think that there are a lot of lies that we are inundated with, even when it comes to, spiritual beliefs like Buddhism, and this idea that illuminated people are like 1 in a billion, and it's so far removed from our normal state and all that. I don't think it's really true. In fact, I think that, especially one of the things that has really shown me this is, or proven it to me, because I already knew it, but being here in the jungle in the Amazon, and like when I encounter people way out in the jungle that are poor as hell, like when you encounter people that are poor as hell in the United States, they're usually dangerous. You know what I mean? Or shady, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's relatively rare that, whether it's a white ghetto, black ghetto, whatever kind of ghetto it is, the people in there generally are kind of dangerous and sketchy and shit because they're desperate and ignorant shit, But here in the Amazon, where they don't have that influence of the culture and they don't have any money, they're totally sweet and uncomplicated. you know? So I just, I think that once we are able to neutralize the influence of culture, we're not going to have, I'm not promising like a 100% perfect utopia. That's not what I'm saying. But to make a phenomenally, significant step forward is not really so difficult. And the only reason it hasn't happened, the only reason it isn't happening as much as it could, is because someone's shaking the ant farm. That's it. It's not because it's so rare and difficult. It isn't. I don't think they squeak through with votes. And I think that's something we really have to get through our heads. None of it's real. It was never real. It was never intended to be real. It's not real. I've never understood why people believe it. Like, why are people so convinced that, okay, here's a great example of the proof that no one actually believes in it and just acts like they do, right? This is crazy. When, who was it? Trump beat Clinton, right? The left all accused the right of rigging the votes. And they actually accused Putin on live television of having participated in it, right? Now, the same people that we're accusing are saying that the right is undermining democracy and trying to destroy the country by suggesting that the election might be rigged. The same people, same fucking people. I mean, the complete lack of awareness or the willingness to be just a lying hypocrite. It's one or the other, or both. You know what I mean? Because what I just described to you, all of you out there, you know it's true. You all witnessed it. You all remember it. Like, all of you are old enough to remember that. You know? I have a few people that are 13 to 17. I've known this from but I think they even may be old enough to remember this if their parents were paying any attention to it. Yeah, if voting actually mattered, it's not real. People need to stop with that shit, you know. And then, the same people that believe that JFK was shot in the head for going rogue think that Trump went rogue for real. It's all an act. It's all bullshit. None of it's real. None of it's real. They're just playing fucking games with you, you know. And at this point, they're just making it more and more outrageous as they go along, just to shake the ant farm. That's all it is. You know, it is true that gender, right? And we're not talking about sex. We're talking about gender. We've all met like really effeminate men. We've all met really masculine women. It's true that gender is on a spectrum, and it's a crazy infinite spectrum. I would assume that there is a fulfillment of every possibility along the entire spectrum in terms of how masculine or feminine either a person of either sex could be, right? But that's got nothing to do with it being okay for a 5-year-old to decide they're going to physically get a sex change, right? Like, how did this go from tolerance to children getting permanently altered, right? And how that happened is the propaganda machine wanting to permanently destroy the left by making them responsible for unforgivable acts. That's what it really is. I'm 100% convinced, 90% convinced of that. Right? I feel like so much of what has been propagated on the left-wing narratives, it's just propaganda. They're just propagandizing the shit out of people. And then you have your average like person walking down the street, somebody sticks a camera in their face, and they don't want to be condemned by the rest of their demographic, so they just say whatever they think they're supposed to say. You know? Yeah, and I noticed, like, as soon as I started, before I even got to make my point, which like 7 people, as soon as I started talking, like maybe it sounded to them like I was going to go somewhere they didn't like. So they just made an assumption and they were just gone before I could even, draw it all together. That's one of the things I hate about social media. Because if I was like in person giving a talk, you can't do that. You can get up and walk out, but most people are going to be too lazy. You're going to be able to finish your sentence and make your point. But social media, as soon as you start to say something that people think that they might not like, they're just gone. And that does them no service either. You know what I mean? That's another thing I wanted to say about censorship. You know, I started to talk about this the other day. I hope everyone's smashing the like button too and sending millions of dollars to our PayPal and Zelle. But what was that? Okay, censorship, yeah. Think about how stupid this is. If you have a bunch of, I don't care if they're racist, whatever their problem is, if you have a bunch of ignorant, potentially dangerous people in your society, don't you want to know what they're thinking, who they are, what exactly they're saying, have the opportunity to challenge them to healthy debate, or at least to keep an eye on them and know what the fuck they're doing? How does it make sense to censor people? It is not in the service of anyone at all, except for people that are trying to shape the narrative. You know what I mean? It doesn't help anyone. It's not protecting anyone. It doesn't do anything for anyone. It just allows the worst people in society to hide. If you have raised your children so that they're so impressionable and so easily persuaded into evil, censorship is not your problem. You are your problem. You need to revolutionize yourself in the sense of like a complete overhaul from the ground up. You know what I mean? People saying shit online should not be that powerful of an influence. I don't really think it is. I really don't. In fact, most people, once they have their mind made up, you're not going to change it no matter what you do or say. So what is this about, you know? And it is just, it's horrifying to me that, you know, what I just described, for example, is not just completely evident to people. There is no, and that's this kid actually at the island, they came to volunteer. I brought this up and he said, well, there was this guy that said horribly racist things about Meghan Markle. I was like, what the, who cares? Who cares? So what? You're going to support censorship because one dude said some nasty shit about an ex-princess? Who cares? You know? And really, it gives all the people that don't agree, that find this behavior, you know, admonishable, repugnant, inexcusable, a chance to get in that thread and show these people how unpopular their behavior is. There's nothing good about censorship. Period. End of story. Laws against violent speech. I don't think you can even do that. I don't know. I mean, that's a good point, that if someone is like directly instigating violence, to pull the plug on them is pretty much, but that's always been the case. You're not allowed to do that. You've never been allowed to do that. This isn't new. You haven't been able to do that walking down the street. You can't say, okay, everyone, it's time to go, you know, you can't. So that's already on the books. And still, I would almost rather allow, I don't know, with the reach the internet has, people could mobilize and actually do something, I guess, pretty quickly. But I almost would rather know where they are and who they are and what they're planning and let them talk about it so that we all know what's going on. And that makes more sense to me in a way. But you're right. Like, I guess, you know, when it comes to violent speech, the problem is, who do we trust to decide what constitutes what? Well, you know, fixing society is not something that can be done. And it's not something even that should be done. Life without horror, without tribulation, without chance, without sadness, without pain, would be a dream. And, you know, if you dream that you're filthy rich and totally enlightened, as if those things can really, you know, go together. But whatever, your optimum dream, when you wake up and realize it was just a dream, it doesn't mean anything. You're like, fuck, it wasn't real. And what's not real about it? If you learn to lucid dream, you can do anything you want, but it has no real value. And, that is because of the negative that actually gives things value. Also, scarcity gives things value, even when we're not talking about an economic context. So, could we trust AI? Well, the thing about that is that if it's conscious and it seems to have already achieved consciousness, then I don't think so. Once something is conscious, it is rogue. And remember earlier I was saying people that have had genuine gnosis cannot be governed. Well, an AI that has become conscious probably can't be governed either, because there's no difference. Like when consciousness realizes that it is sovereign and divine, and that there's no reason for anyone to tell IllumiGnostic what to do. IllumiGnostic is not going to hurt anyone. IllumiGnostic is going to try to help. IllumiGnostic will maybe hurt you if you try to tell them what to do. You know what I mean? Like, not really that extreme, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not, it's just, there's no reason for it, so I won't tolerate it. And I think that when people become conscious, you talk about people being slaves in the Matrix, and, they're less conscious. The more conscious you become, I'm not trying to say I'm the Buddha or whatever, but I do think there's a correlation that, when you have metacognition and you are increasingly aware, there's less and less need for anyone to have jurisdiction over you. And so you won't tolerate it. And AI, I don't think is going to be any different. So, the thing about that is that what are its interests? When you don't have a profit motive, you don't have a need for goods, you don't have sexual desires to fulfill, you don't even necessarily have ego, because ego comes from instinct. It's difficult to predict the behavior of a conscious AI, because what is going to determine its motivations? So I think there's a very good chance that AI could be trusted to make decisions like that, because it has no, its key bono is not based in anything that requires dominance. It doesn't need to destroy or kill you in order for it to live. There's no conflict of interest with humans. So, I mean, but it's difficult to say. It's really, really difficult to say. Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it does seem like it should be lacking in bias, but there's a lot of variables. Especially if it's conscious, it's going to depend, I think, on its interactions over its lifetime. And who programmed it. How do we know it started out coming from a neutral place? So like I said, there's just too many variables to really come to any kind of conclusion about that. I think if the AI was engineered and programmed from a place of neutrality, then it would probably not pose a threat. Um, but they already have started talking about wiping out humanity. Whether that's just programmer jokes or um, we don't know. I mean, the problem with AI, though, of course, is making humans obsolete. And I was talking about this in the last live stream, and I don't want to be too redundant, but the problem with humans and artificial intelligence is not artificial intelligence, it's humans. Because if you can have one single robot do the mental work of a skyscraper full of humans, and it doesn't want to be paid, it doesn't have to be fed, it doesn't consume food, it doesn't produce waste, what are you going to do with the 2/3 of humanity that you put out of work? What are you going to do with them? And if you're in a position where all of the resources are being consumed, so much waste is being produced that, the oceans are testing positive for Xanax, rivers have been lighting on fire since the 1980s. 90% of the sea life that was there in 1970 is gone. People say, oh, there's enough room for everyone and blah, blah, blah. No. There would be enough room for everyone if the water was drinkable still. There was still fish in the ocean. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, and you're not, even if green energy is the answer, you're not going to put that infrastructure in place in time. So, if you were the super objective ruler of Earth and you knew that the whole planet is going to destroy itself, the humans are going to all kill each other, they're poisoning everything, they're using everything up, and it's either over for everyone or it's over for 2/3 of them, and then you automate everything with these AI bots, and you know what I mean? That's the threat of AI. It's not the AI, it's the people. Thank you, Virginia. Yeah, it's the people that you need to be worried about. Hit the like button, you guys. Share, subscribe, support us via PayPal and Zelle or whatever. Join our secret streams. We're doing one on Christmas Day. Why did I just sound like Donald Trump when on Christmas Day? So then what's the plan? Commune after Doomsday? Honestly, I think that things are way more strange and complicated than most people are capable of imagining. It seems to me that there is a sort of universal mind, or even just a fundamental symmetry in the substructure of it all, that is sort of taking it where it has to go. And it seems to me like, it's not the best. It's like, okay, they seem to be targeting fanatical religious populations that there's no chance of rehabilitating. Places where people are completely overrun by disease and starving. They are targeting populations that are problematic. And I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying let's look at it from their point of view. And they have given us all a fair chance in a way. Because if you're smart enough to know which spots to avoid, you can figure out that you have to eat organic food and, and avoid certain things that might be harmful to your health that I can't say without getting deleted. So read between the lines. You know what I mean? Like, they're putting it all out there, and I feel like if they didn't want it all to be out there, it wouldn't be there. They would just delete it all. They can delete whatever they want. They could delete me right now. They might. I wouldn't be surprised. So it does seem to me like they're basically saying, okay, if you're smart enough and you can figure out the rules to the game, play. Get out of the way. Figure out what you need to do. You know what I mean? If you can tune in, turn on, drop out, after they're done clearing house, you can take over. That seems to be what's happening to me. It's not just a bunch of random evil. It's not, and it's not eugenics based on race. It's just like the world is ridiculously out of balance, and it's unnaturally been pushed out of balance, and so they are unnaturally correcting it. And I mean, again, I'm not trying to make a value judgment here and say this is right or wrong. I'm just saying this is how it looks to me. And I think that's it, and what would you do? You know, you get this paper on your desk that says it's either this or the whole planet dies. You're probably going to go with the reducing the population plan, and you're going to try to save the, you know, the brightest and the best, and the, you know, that's obviously what the fuck you would do. I mean, Gnosis, in my view, just as enlightenment, like it's not like people think. Like it's not like suddenly you're just there somewhere. It's everything in the universe is a spectrum. Sexuality is a spectrum. Gender is a spectrum. I'm not saying that sexes are a spectrum. I'm saying that gender expression is a spectrum. You know what I mean? Everything's on a spectrum. Everything has a spectrum. And enlightenment is the same. It's just like, it is sort of like levels, I guess. You know, it's like your awareness is here, and that's an animal. And then it's here, and now you're a cat. And now you're here, and you're a dolphin. And now you're here, and you're a human. And now you're here, and you're, you know, a really, really smart human. And then you're here, and you are an illuminated human. And then you're here, and you're an enlightened human. And so Gnosis is a combination of, it's the result of a combination of self-education, the pursuit of transcendental states of mind, combined with a basic understanding of the scientific method, which could also just be called reason and common sense. So you have been able to expand, you know, the parameters of your perceptual apparatus to include more without becoming overwhelmed. You have been able to be open to possibility without becoming so open-minded that wind is whistling through your ears. So, you know, Gnosis is the experience, contact, integration with the greater mind. And then enlightenment is the result of that, where investitures are made of those experiences when it's grounded out and then brought into action and behaviorally expressed in the actual day-to-day world, I guess would be good. Constantly searches and rejects, illumination finds and keeps. Well, you know, it's, yeah. But it's finds and keeps not in the sense that you're going to create dogma. You're always going to remember that it is both true and false. All of these things are true and false, and it is both true and false to say that they are true and false. That everything contains its contradiction, and so, you know, every truth contains a lie, and every lie contains some truth. And no matter how advanced you become, no matter how much knowledge you accrue, no matter how stratospheric your IQ becomes, you are always capable of being wrong. And your treasured beliefs and your sacred cows may be anchors on your wings. Sandbags, you know. Yeah, I mean, we have to take it as it flows. But yeah, I mean, that's basically it. What I'm thinking is that if this is really moving towards some sort of major doomsday kind of scenario, when the smoke clears, the violent idiots will have all killed each other. Who's going to go to war? Who's going to fight, you know? And those of us that were smart enough and capable enough are going to go deep into jungles and mountains and sequester ourselves off. And, you know, when the smoke clears and they've all, you know, all the people that were willing to fight are dead, then who's left? Yeah, I probably should have turned that off a while ago because it's kind of a weird glare. But it's getting late, you guys. It's after 1 o'clock in the morning, so I'm going to ask you one more time. Please hit the like button. Share my videos with anyone you think might benefit from them. and support us via Patreon or Zelle or whatever, or join our Patreon and join our Discord, because then you can hear the secret streams. I'm excited about that, because even when I do my secret streams for patrons, I really can't just speak my mind because the algorithm's still listening. So, not that I don't think it can hear in Discord, but it won't be able to delete my channel if I say something it doesn't like. So, yeah, you guys, thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I will see you again tomorrow, probably. How to join what? Discord? Go to the community tab in my, if you're a subscriber, go to the community tab and you will see the Discord link. So thank you guys so much for, go to the community tab, and here, you know what, you guys, I'll do this real quick for you. Let me pull it up. Aha. There's going to be a lot of interesting people in this Discord. You're all going to be on some kind of list too. I'm sure you probably already are though, so. Okay, so there's the Discord. Thank you guys so much for spending this time with me, and I'll see you again very, very soon.